Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season. Major League Baseball, golf, the NBA, and NHL playoffs especially. All the latest stats, news, and scores are available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to betonline.ag today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. Are you looking for a higher potential return on your savings? Turn to our sponsor, Save. As an SEC-registered investment advisor, Save safely combines the best parts of saving and investing with its Market Savings program. Market Savings is a savings product that provides you with market returns instead of interest. The returns come from diversified investment portfolios based on your individual investment profile. The return from the investments is paid to you at the end of the selected investment term. But investing comes with risk, right? Well, with Save, your deposit is FDIC insured and never used for any investments. The current variable APYs are 9.07% for the 1-year product and 7.9% for the 5-year product. So what does this cost you? Well, Save only charges a fee when your investments make you money. To learn more or to sign up, visit www.joinsave.com/state. That's joinsave.com/state. The link to the website is in the description of this podcast. State of State invites you to join Save. Joining me this week on State of State from Blue White Illustrated as a part of the On3 network, he is my fellow Penn State alumnus, Penn State's own Thomas Frank Carr. I miss you, T. Frank. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. I'm glad we're getting to do this. It's been too long since you and I have hung out and talked on air.
I know. We go all the way back to the comm radio days, which is very, very special to me. And if you're not a Penn State diehard that doesn't know about the college communications and comm radio, they added an extra M to it a few years ago, and that I found personally offensive because it just changed what I was used to as an adult.
Yeah, and as an adult, I found that I am less flexible and change is hard. So as much as whenever it happens, it's like a cheese grater or like sandpaper. It hurts more and more to like smooth off those surfaces of this is something new, and instead of just letting everything kind of oxidize and rust into place.
I don't want new. I want the same. I want my routine. I want to wake up. I want to have my Metamucil, and I want to go on about my day. Thank you all for tuning in here on State of State. This episode is dedicated to a potential world in which quarterback Beau Pribula has the entire offense of Andy Kotelnicki built around him. What could that possibly look like? The only man probably walking the earth who could figure out what that is T. Frank, because of all the film study that he does. Obviously, he's looked heavily into Andy Kotelnicki, has watched all of Beau Pribula's tape to this point in time. So figure for this hypothetical discussion, he would be perfect. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and rate us. Follow us on social media, X, Instagram, and TikTok at State of State Pod. Are you on TikTok, T. Frank? I think you should get on TikTok.
I am not. I am in the camp of I'm not necessarily comfortable with TikTok, but my wife is, so I get the benefit of like, we sit on the couch on Friday nights and I watch her TikTok. So I still partake. I just don't have my own.
Secondhand TikToking. Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah. It's the right place to be for me.
So let's dive right into this, because my thought process has been
to light the internet on fire.
So this is to piss people off. Yeah, pretty much. But since Andy Kotelnicki got hired, first thing that most Penn State fans did is they went to his Kansas tape. And at Kansas, Jaden Daniels, Jason Bean, two very mobile quarterbacks. They were not consistently having two quarterbacks on the field at the same time. However, Andy Kotelnicki took advantage of that. You see the strengths that offense was able to highlight ran the ball very effectively, a lot of very unique and exotic sets. But the way that Andy Kotelnicki described it when he was introduced as the new offensive coordinator at Penn State is that he's like, it's kind of like a Blizzard milkshake. It's a lot of stuff on the outside. And on the inside, it's vanilla and chocolate ice cream. It's very basic in that sense. So I thought that was an apt description, but I think so many people saw what the Kansas offense was, and everybody was like, this isn't built for Drew Aller. This is built for Beau Pribula. At this point in time, I think we understand Andy Kotelnicki is not necessarily beholden to one style of quarterback. So in the tape study you've done of Andy, which of the two quarterbacks between Aller and Pribula do you think really fits what he's trying to do, or does it almost not matter?
That's kind of a TBD thing. And you can go back to it was important when we first introduced these topics for me, which was to what you just said of Kansas is on one extreme of what he was working with offensively that didn't necessarily mesh with what Penn State had from a starting quarterback position. But if you go back to his time at Buffalo, there were some more classic pocket passers. And it's really about what you lean into offensively, what concepts and what augmentations on offensive plays that you prefer. Now, there is a certain amount of evolution over time that becomes baked into any offensive system. There's, the core foundational principles, and some of those things aren't going to change. So when James Franklin says the offense isn't changing that much, they're going to be based in an outside zone system. It's a run first approach. And I think that's the thing to understand with a lot of offensive coordinators. But generally, offense is the foundation of your run game influences your passing game and how you fold in play action. And that's really what this offense is about. It blurs the line between run plays and pass plays and makes defenders guess, second guess, and pulls them out of position in order to create advantages in the secondary, as he calls it, distortion. His other buzzword is distorting the offense. So when you ask which one of these guys is it best suited for, what we saw at Kansas, straight up copy-paste, that's Beau Pribula's offense. If you go back and you look at some of the stuff that they did at Buffalo with some more traditional passers, they lean into other concepts like RPO, play action, and that's where the offense can be more traditional or more modern spread college offense, and really that's how you tailor around the guys you have to accentuate your talent.
I think there needs to be an honest conversation about the separation in terms of ability between Drew Aller and Beau Pribula, and I think it was very evident during the blue-white game. Granted, the wind was up, weather being a bit of a factor, but it was very obvious to me watching that game, T. Franklin, that arm ability, arm talent, poise in the pocket, the ability to read the defense, it's Drew Aller by a lot in comparison to Beau Pribula. And a lot of that is experience, having played a full season, having played a little bit as a freshman. Pribula has gotten his sporadic chances in live game action, but there's a gap, and that was to be expected. And then you can see how Beau Pribula out there limited opportunities to throw the ball in 2023. And then in the blue-white game, it was like, this isn't the strongest arm, and you still see him processing things in the passing game. So I think there's this love affair that Penn State fans have right now with Beau, because even James Franklin said it. He's a larger Trace McSorley, which immediately he's wearing number 9 as well. Oh my God, it's all. But he's also provided a spark when he's gotten in there, and the question has been brought up. Okay, well, the offense seems to work better with Beau in there. Can you articulate really the gap between Aller and Pribula? Because in my opinion, it feels large.
So I would say that I don't necessarily have enough information on Beau Pribula, the passer, to make definitive statements. We've only, as you mentioned, seen him in select situations and in practice settings against the primarily the starting defense in a game in which they were blitzing more than you would expect in a spring game. Like, people say that the game is vanilla, and that's true, but I made the joke on social media. It's more like Tahitian vanilla. It's very fancy vanilla, where the first play of the game, they've got Jalen Reed playing in a deep coverage, and he's a linebacker, and showing some of the exotic things they can do with the defense. They blitzed they had corner blitzes in that game, and it overwhelmed the blue team. So I would say the area of concern that we've seen when we see Beau Pribula is an unwillingness to get rid of the football and to kind of kill a play and live to fight another day. That, I think, is the one consistent thing we've seen. Is it's not necessarily decision-making in the passing game, it's decision-making when you're screwed. Like when the play is over and you still have to execute something. Mm-hmm. That's where Drew Aller has been, I think, above and beyond mature, throwing the football away a lot. Maybe a little more than he should at times, instead of risking some passes that we think he can make. So I guess that's where I would say, from a Beau Pribula perspective, I know from what we know that he was much better in the spring now than he was previously, but he didn't show that progress during the blue-white game. So that's one area where I think he's improved as a passer, but we haven't gotten to see that. The real thing that we're feeling when he's in the game, though, is there's a higher floor to the offense. There is more stable production, because we talk about viable threats on the football field and the receivers outside and the run game and taking some pressure off of the running backs. Well, going back to Andy Kotelnicki's distortion thing, his idea of distorting the defense, if you are running a certain scheme and the running back is the primary runner to the front side, but you have a viable threat on the backside as the quarterback runner, you put the defensive line in some tough situations that they then have to make decisions about who they're going to cover and how they're going to allow other threats like the quarterback to exist or to take it away. When you take that away, you give them something else. So there is this domino effect of the quarterback run threat that gives you some easier looks. We just haven't seen Beau Pribula be able to take advantage of those as a passer, because the situations in the regular season games haven't been right for him to do that. And I think he's naturally a guy that wants to run the football. Like, that seems to be a tendency of his. Given the two, he knows he can get 15 yards with his legs instead of throwing the ball for 10 and letting the receiver do the work.
I have no expectation for Beau Pribula to unseat Drew Aller by September. I fully expect Drew Aller to be the starting quarterback. So I just want to throw that out there. However, the limited opportunities that we saw of Drew Aller in the spring game, it was like, okay, you kind of got a feel for what the offense could be. A lot of him in the shotgun, a lot of RPO, a lot of him at least leaning into run fakes. And am I the only one who thinks back to the Rutgers game? And I'm like, that's a terrible idea. It's no disrespect to Drew. It's just from an athletic standpoint, I feel a lot more comfortable with that version of the offense going through Beau Pribula's athleticism versus Drew Aller, which, again, this new Big Ten we're about to be living in, it's going to be a little bit faster. It's going to be a little bit more physical. And I wasn't all that enthused by what Drew Aller was doing last year as a runner. So I don't necessarily need to see more of that.
This is the $1 million question for me, is how much does he need to run in the offense in order to unlock its full potential?
Yeah, keep people honest.
Yeah. And I think he showed up in a game where they were not having it. He had, I think, one opportunity to run, and Tyler Holsworth, I was going through some of the film, and one of the things that made me laugh is Tyler Holsworth did not give him the football on a read keep. The quarterback, when they're in the mesh point, they can keep the ball or they can pull it. He tried to pull it, and Tyler Holsworth was like, this is my only time to run the football in my Penn State career. You can't have it, is how that interaction went.
Context. It's the spring game. It's the spring game. It's a scrimmage. It's a glorified scrimmage at that, but still, it is the only sample size we have to go off.
Yeah, and so I think it's going to be important. I think there are elements that he's going to have to provide those opportunities, because any scheme you can defeat with better talent, because blocking and tackling and all of those things are still the fundamentals of football. You can't out-scheme yourself to the point where teams that are far superior to you in certain areas, you can just eliminate that advantage. You have to win in the margins, right? And that's what the quarterback run game is presenting an opportunity to win in the margins and to overcome some of those areas. You can see there's situations where the Kansas offense last year kind of devolved into a triple option. And I think that's the worst case scenario for Penn State, because there's a ceiling to that. And that's kind of the conversation about running quarterbacks and service academy style offenses, and when you bring those elements in.
Don't say service academy. No, I don't want to.
Well, go watch the Kansas State game, because by that point, Jason Bean wasn't playing. Their third quarterback was in the game, who was basically, by the look of him, a fullback. And so they had, wildcat situations, 2 running backs in the backfield. They had the quarterback next to the running back as the, switching positions. They did a lot of things in order to eliminate their issues, but then you still don't have a passing game. So those elements are in the offense, but I think the more you lean into those, the more you are limiting your ability to produce game-winning offense. I think in the biggest situations against the teams that can put up points and don't have limitations from their passing attack. And that's going to be the line they ride this year, is how much juice can they squeeze out of the passing attack, knowing they're going to be a run-first offense and trying to win with play action and spacing and zone defenses and things like that.
So this is obviously a whole hypothetical thing because of what I said before. Aller is expected to be the starter.
Yeah.
However, if we fall into an alternate universe, we're in the upside down now. I love Stranger Things. If we fall into an alternate universe where Beau Pribula is the starter, say that's by injury or something miraculous happens in the next few months and he does overtake Drew Aller, how would you build this offense knowing what Andy Kotelnicki does and knowing the strengths and weaknesses of Beau Pribula?
So in this upside down, are the receivers then good? So is this the only change? Because it could be super nice if
unfortunately it's the only change. Yes.
Okay. All right. So it's one of those photos where you just leave the one color, like you just have, it's just blue. It's black
Back
and white
to the
with blue.
future where we're just going to fade Drew Aller out and then it's Beau Pribula in. So it's a little different.
All right. So again, that's where my question of where he is as a passer is kind of what you need to know. What you need to know about where he is, because this offense is, I don't want to say foolproof, designed to make it easier for the quarterback so that you can put anyone back there, but there is elements of it takes care of a lot of the issues of not placing all of the onus on the receiver to get open and to make it about the talent, right? So there's elements of this offense that are very trendy in football, especially in the NFL. It is, I would say, Shanahan adjacent, where you have the Kyle Shanahan offenses in the NFL that all come off of his dad's tree. That includes McVay and all of these different proliferations to Green Bay and onward. What they do in this offense, like the 49ers, is they use shifts and motions to put defenders in situations where they're not at an advantage. So, for example, you start out in a 2x2 set, which is 2 receivers on either side of the field, and then you motion into a different offensive set. Now, the defense has to communicate, and while doing that, you may have shifted your best receiver into the slot. And if they're not communicating, you might get a busted coverage. At the very least, what you're going to do is you're going to get that player potentially either in a zone match situation or in a man situation against a safety, or against a coverage where you are running routes that are going to break that coverage unless the defense is perfect. So can Beau Pribula read that and make the right decision? I think he can, and then it becomes about execution and all the things with Aller that we talk about of clutch, etc., that make you a good quarterback. But all of this has to be supported by a good run game, because the offensive line, I think there's a real possibility this fall that the pass protection takes a major step backward, because I don't think we gave Caden Wallace enough credit for what he was as a tackle by the end of his career. So this offense does mitigate those obvious passing situations, but there's always going to be a time when you have to drop back on 3rd and 7 and throw the football. Like all of your tricks and all of the different things you can do, all the wrinkles, it doesn't matter because you need to get 7 yards. The defense knows that. So there is an element of that, but the goal this year is to minimize that and create explosive plays in these play action situations. I think both guys can do it. Beau Pribula could operate the offense, but Aller is the one this is the whole thing. His whole career has been, when he gets it, he has the skills to elevate the offense to a level that Beau Pribula cannot. And Penn State, as much as they're running a power offense and it's going to be run heavy, they're trying, I think, to hit on the upside of the 5-star quarterback, which that hasn't gone anywhere. He still has all of those abilities to be the guy. But in our bizarro world situation, I think you still win the same number of games with Beau Pribula. It looks different. It's more college-y. It's less, I think, predicated on those RPOs and play actions. But he provides you that dual threat ability of stretching the defense as a runner and with his arm.
It's very reminiscent in my mind of two completely different athletes, but circa Tim Tebow at Florida. It's one, maybe two reads, tuck it and run, and you're doing a lot of movement and motion. It's very Urban Meyer-esque almost to a degree.
Yeah.
And he's still like that one or two read offense. If the quarterback is the best athlete on the field, you can get away with it. I don't know if you can necessarily say that about Beau anytime that Penn State steps on the field against Big Ten opponents. I mean, there will be a fair amount of those opportunities, but yeah, and it's the thing I come back to with Drew, and that a lot of people have spoken about, and yourself included, is that when he is not bothered in the pocket, boy, he's just fine. That won't be the case this year. You lost maybe one of the best tackles in program history in Olu Fashanu, who didn't give up a sack for 2 years. I agree with you. Caden Wallace was underrated, underappreciated outwardly, I'd say, by the fan base. I'm sure the program appreciated him. Hunter Norzad, seasoned center. If anything, the strength now feels like the interior of this offensive line. I know Nick Dawkins is expected to be the new center and didn't start at center last year, but still tons of experience. I feel good about JB Nelson, Vega Ioane, Sal Wormley at guard, Cooper Cousins. I mean, like, there just feels like there's really good depth in the interior of the offensive line. So pass protection is going to be a struggle. Wide receivers are not explosive. You have some really interesting tight ends. There's mismatches to be taken advantage of, but when you take away the tackle position as a certainty, that's where I feel uncomfortable, because Beau Pribula, all of a sudden, you have the visions of a play action rollout, and you're trying to get out in space and move the pocket, and it's a possibly collapsing pocket at any given time.
Yeah. I think this offense, this is the part where I will give you some hope, is that Andy Kotelnicki is great at accentuating strengths and minimizing weaknesses. And Kansas didn't have a great offensive line. Dominic Pooney was their left tackle, who was going to play guard in the NFL and was a good player, but they didn't necessarily have what Penn State has up front, even knowing these guys are green and they're not necessarily the proven commodities that you've had. Again, the point of this offense is to blur and to blend run and pass concepts, to put the defensive coverage in a blender and try to get guys open. So it's a little more definitive. You're not doing as much. It's really interesting. Drop back passing probably is an area where I have my weakest evaluation skills in terms of like concepts and putting things together from a pure progression perspective, and you know, working on that this offseason. But going through the film of Kansas, there wasn't a whole lot of drop back passing anyway. So my evaluation of this offense has all been based off the passing game is going to take a step backward anyway in terms of its pure progression, have to read the defense, you know, pre-post snap and make decisions based on route concepts and combinations. And it's going to be more, I don't want to say point and shoot, but more of these first read open. And if that's not open, you know, like you have a check down or something else where there's another option on the play. So, and the RPOs are a one read sort of pass anyway. So there's going to be, I think, a little more simplicity in the passing game to work around those problems at tackle. And then it becomes the receivers have to get open. You know, that comes back to that of you can give them a lot of help schematically, but they still have to beat their DB one-on-one when they're in those situations. And that to me is what is going to define this program. If they can get those guys open, if those guys can get themselves open, Andy Kotelnicki can scheme them open the other times.
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today.
Is there anybody in the portal right now
in terms of wide receiver that you really feel like Penn State could bring in and would be like, man, surefire number one overnight?
No,
Because I don't feel that way. I don't know.
no.
It was pretty well picked over in the winter.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because I was doing a little bit of work on this is a total tangent here, but I was doing a little bit of work on the Penn State receivers and how they operate, and I was watching some film of Dante Cephas. He should have worked. He's a great route runner. I thought he did a lot of things really well from an athletic perspective and from a technical perspective, but nothing really worked last year. And then Malik McClain leaves the program in the spring transfer portal window, and it feels like they're kind of back to square one, where they found guys that should have fit and found guys that should have worked, and whatever it was from an offensive chemistry perspective last year, it was just off. Those have been the things that we have heard that's been reported of, like, there was not the level of dedication, I guess you could say, to getting better all the time, the way that other positions have. That receiver just wasn't matching some of those levels of dedication, might be the best word. And that's not on the whole room. So it's just on, guys that should have worked out better. And now that you are in this situation where you have what you have, you go out and you get Julian Fleming, who is another piece to that puzzle, kind of replacing Dante Cephas as an outside receiver to bring in some stability into this offense, to work open against zone coverage, to work open against man coverage in short areas, and to be kind of like a stick mover guy. But you've lost a lot of those players that were explosive. So you bring in something to prop up one area, and then another whole part falls down. So the receiver position has just been kind of tumultuous this whole time.
It's weird. So Justin and I did an episode this week just kind of looking at the Penn State wide receiver position as it stands now and what we expect it to be for 2024, and then also thinking about the recent history. And it just feels like there was such a nice track of number one wide receivers coming out of Penn State.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden in 2022, once Jahan Dotson left, Parker Washington sustained some injuries, never really realized that same potential, probably not the same athlete, obviously, as Jahan Dotson, but it feels like, looking back on the autopsy of 2023, perhaps there was more happening with Mike Yurcich and the rest of the coaching staff of that disagreement, that lack of collaboration. That's something that James Franklin has spoken publicly about since Yurcich was fired. There's more collaboration. We're working together, all that sort of stuff. And on top of that, Marcus Hagan's his first season as the wide receiver coach. I can only imagine him being put in the situation of, you have probably a lame duck offensive coordinator. You have a head coach who's not happy with the offensive coordinator. The offense isn't really performing to the degree that which we all expected it to. And the offensive coordinator is like, give me this quarterback that I've wanted all this time, and it's not working. And by the way, you're new on the job. Make all these wide receivers work. It just never materialized.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've been thinking about fit, too, of coaches with coordinators. So the funny thing is we talk about the offense last year, and I'm not here to defend Mike Yurcich, but I think that it's interesting looking at the characteristics of coaches and characteristics of what they were and what they were trying to achieve. And James Franklin has kind of spelled it out, where you got to be careful. You got to look at track record. You got to look at history of a guy who, did he have a great quarterback that made everything work? Did he have a special situation? Was he able to create in multiple different circumstances? And let's unpack some of that stuff, where we're talking specifically about Mike Yurcich and Mason Rudolph at Oklahoma State. And also, like, how he wanted receivers to be, how he wanted things to happen from a route perspective, where they're at what he did, whether it was his system or not, it was vertically based. It was attacking down the field, multiple options, letting the quarterback find who's open. But, you go back again to the personnel you're using. James Washington, a good vertical deep threat who's also a high point contested catch guy who can be open when he's not open. Penn State didn't have that guy last year. They just straight up did not have that guy. You look at 2022, and they use the middle of the football field. They use their tight ends in a similar way, vertically down the middle of the field, creating explosive plays down the seams. there was this hesitancy to throw the ball over the middle of the field because they were playing to their defense last year. And I think if you ask me what's the major problem, is that it was a mentality problem where the offense was trying to play to the defense instead of trying to score points. They're trying to play a style of offense that was ground and pound, ball control, be explosive when it's opportunistic. And the whole thing didn't work because you're asking a guy who's an aggressive, throw the ball down the field, spread offense, outside zone, read option guy to then go Iowa. And you have to be full Iowa to go Iowa. There has really to be to really do it. And to me, that was the personality issue that they had last year, where they were trying to play that way and it didn't fit. And they didn't get those explosive plays, those timely plays when they set it up with everything else because of all the things that we've pointed out on film and all the problems they've had since then. I guess this is a long way of saying, like, I think that you can have a good offensive mind, and there were good concepts, there were good ideas in Mike Yurcich's offense that work. They have worked previously. But if you don't have a good overarching plan and you don't have confidence in the players to execute the plan, things get tighter and tighter and tighter, and then you get what you got last year. So this year, there's a very different vibe about this offense that I think they're going to be more confident, they're going to be more explosive, they're going to do things that are synergistic between the offensive run game and the passing game, where it felt like last year things were very disjointed. As much as they were trying to marry those concepts together, I felt like it was more of a pure what Mike Yurcich had done previously of zone and then concepts off of it. They just didn't have enough threats to make it work. So Marcus Hagen's fitting into that picture might fit better this year with Andy Kotelnicki and the style that he gets from receivers who are big physical catch and run guys, as opposed to somebody who's just going to be a vertical threat down the field trying to stretch the defense, in what Mike Yurcich's offense was like last year.
It's the interesting thing about what James Franklin said when Kotelnicki was hired is we want to marry his exotic schemes, and we want to be able to run the ball, but we also want to protect the football the way that we did, but we also want to get explosive plays. It felt like a lot of things that, yeah, of course, I'd like to see that all happen at the same time. The likelihood of them all lining up and being, married together, as you said, time will tell. That's a big ask. That feels like something that top flight offenses often don't even accomplish. So that's something hopefully comes all together. And
so from that perspective, there is evidence again with the Big 12 is different. Like, we got to understand, Big 12 is kind of a hodgepodge of people who are vaguely interested in playing defense and a bunch of safeties who vaguely know what they're doing. It is like, oh, wow, this is different. I would never see a Big 10 safety be so bad in coverage like this, where you got guys that are just running wide open over the middle of the football field, and it's systemic. Like, that whole conference, you run a scissors concept and it gets open and you get a 70-yard touchdown over the top. I don't know how it always seems to work. But Kansas ran fewer plays than Penn State last year. They ran far fewer passing plays, and they still garnered more explosive passing plays out of that offense. So that's what James Franklin is pointing to when there's offensive success from similar situations of using two tight ends, two running backs, having power formations, and still generating explosive plays. They were per capita far more explosive than Penn State was last year.
To wrap up this hypothetical situation, no one wants Drew Allar to get injured. There's a very much the expectation he's going to be the starter once we get to September. I don't think that will be anything changing in that front. And if Beau Pribula were to step in, there's a degree of comfort that I feel hearing you say, yeah, there's a chance that if you put the offense in the hands of Beau, it would be different, but you'd have similar results, which I think is probably a positive and a negative for Penn State fans. And you said very recently, it's like, yeah, Drew Allar needs to beat Ohio State, the Michigans, the Oregons, the USCs of the world. Like, that's
okay. All right.
That's the tipping point. And I think that's why there's this potentially negative emotional attachment with Drew Allar after this past season. And you see the flashes with Beau, and it's like, what could be? Maybe we could beat one of these guys with him.
So I apparently was not facetious enough in the moment for people, because you're not the only one. Like, I put that out there on social media and people are like, yeah, he's right about that. I'm like, I was joking.
I've known you for like 15 years, and I was like, this is pretty good stuff. This is good.
I was a little too serious. I was a little too in
It
character.
was in the eyes. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, T. Frank's fired up. This is good.
I was method acting. I was straight up. I was kidding about that. Which every time I seem to joke on the internet, like I made a
Right.
joke in one of our shorts last year that they weren't announcing who the starting quarterback was. Remember that last year during training camp, they would not announce that.
Why are you doing this?
And I was like, and I made a joke on YouTube, like Drew Aller definitely isn't the starting quarterback. And the entire internet, like, it got entirely too many views, and everyone's like, this is inaccurate reporting. I'm like, apparently I don't know how to joke. So I want to apologize. Drew Aller can't go back in time and beat Michigan, and they're not on the schedule. So, like, you can't get that blood out of that stone. What was the question? Because I totally forgot. That has been on my mind for about a week now.
No, it was just more of just an observation that it's like, okay, I take comfort in hearing from you that it's like, listen, the way Kotelnicki is and the way he could put together an offense, whether it's Drew, whether it's Beau, he could potentially find a way to win. The results might not be very different.
Yeah.
Justin nailed it on the head. A number of weeks ago, we were talking about the emotional attachment Penn State fans have with Beau Pribula. Everybody loves the backup quarterback, but he's come in there. He's provided a spark. He's got things going. And Drew Aller had all this hype, and then it just didn't really play out the way everybody expected in 2023. So I think it's encouraging. I think Drew is kind of under the gun, so to speak, from the Penn State fan base altogether. The thing I want to end on here, and it's the thing I don't think is getting enough conversation in this whole what could Kotelnicki's offense look like in 2024 debate, is we continue to talk about how there's going to be a bigger focus on the running game, which is great. I am very happy to hear that, because you have Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen. Everybody knows what those two are capable of. Granted, Nick Singleton wasn't what we hoped he would be in 2023 as we saw him in 2022. And it also does make me ask the question of, are we going to see Kotelnicki go deeper into the depth chart of running backs, a Cam Wallace, a Quentin Martin Jr., to potentially get a lot of different guys involved in this rushing attack? And how does Singleton and Kaytron fit into that after, especially, I think, Singleton, a bit of a disappointing 2023?
There's a couple of different layers to that I think feed into the Beau Pribula conversation. If this were Beau's offense, first off, talking to him this spring, he said, I feel like this offense fits me really well. He was almost laughing. He was having so much fun in the spring operating this offense. He really enjoys being in this offense. So I think it fits him very well. Better than Drew in that context of what it can be if Beau Pribula elevates his abilities as a passer. There's an area of Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen can still have an improved season this year because of the core concepts and the core philosophies of this offense. But the area where I think Beau is going to help the most is in those situations, getting those guys explosive plays. One of the things that we saw that will not work with Drew Aller, period. They ran a lot of, again, like I mentioned, triple option looks with Jason Bean, the quarterback, under center, and two running backs on either side in the shotgun. They, I forget their names specifically at Kansas, but Neal was the main running back. They got a lot of explosive plays from the quarterback and the running backs in the run game because they were running those concepts. That's where I think Beau Pribula fits into next year, in a package where they put the defense in conflict, where maybe you have those guys in the backfield and suddenly Kaytron Allen split out into the slot. Or, as you mentioned, three running backs on the field, and then Quentin Martin is in the slot, or moving those chess pieces around, but you have that quarterback run threat, which forces another safety into the box, allowing for those explosive plays. Because I think the thing I'm most excited about is you look at the data and you look at the film. When the running backs got a lot of targets in the offense last year, they were checkdowns. They're afterthoughts necessarily in the passing concept. This offense gets those guys downfield. wheel routes, rail routes coming out of the field, doing seam routes down the middle of the field. Andy Kotelnicki aggressively used running backs in the passing game. So if you want to get these guys and actually get the most out of your passing attack with running backs, it's targeting them downfield. So those are areas where I think from the run and pass perspective, Beau Pribula can have a role in this offense. And to kind of spin this back to reality, that's where I think his role is going to be. It's not just going to be on third down or in the red zone or things like that where they want to add an extra hat in the run game. It's going to be generating explosive plays with that particular combination, and then it's going to be about the passing game and being able to, I'd say, not be one-dimensional when he comes on the field, because that's the problem with the Beau Pribula offense, just like the Drew Aller offense, is if you lean into these tendencies and the quarterback option game and putting the defense in conflict, it only affects the front seven unless you can attack downfield into those windows you're creating. You crowd the box, you have the receivers outside, the receivers need to win, and the quarterback needs to know when to throw them the football to maximize the explosiveness of the offense. If Beau Pribula can't do that, then it doesn't really matter. You're still a limited offense in the whole kind of like big picture. But either way, with either guy, I think they will get more explosive plays this year, and I think they're going to be a better, more functional, to use again the buzzwords, synergistic offense. And I'm going to now leave here and do a Silicon Valley presentation with a slideshow using synergy and corporate motivational tactics.
If anything, what I'm hearing you say is that there's the potential this year that if you look at the wide receiver room and it's like, can you guys get open downfield or, in one-on-one? No. Okay. Well, the running backs can. So
yeah. And the tight ends can.
And we don't even know. We haven't seen enough of the running backs in this style. We didn't see a lot of it in the blue-white game. So it's almost impossible to tell. But if that room can accomplish the things that the wide receiver room is not, that's encouraging, but it remains to be seen.
Still got to win on the outside. Like all of these things, all of these opportunities, and this is kind of where you go to Kansas to find a guy who has found a way to win without the advantages of superstar talent at critical positions. So how do you work around not having great receiver room? How do you make an offense explosive while not having a great receiver room? But I also think that there's an opportunity for these guys to just be better than they were last year because of the situation and opportunity. Caden Saunders is a guy I keep coming back to of maybe he's not the athlete that we thought he was coming out of high school in terms of pure speed. He's a good route runner. You put a guy with enough speed, good route running, and creates that separation because he's got a combination of those two things into this offense in the slot, and I think you can generate some explosive plays out of the passing game that were there last year. They just couldn't get to. Like, there were some opportunities for Caden Saunders last year that they set up. Just, they never got to it, and he has to be better and more consistent. I'm a little more positive about Trey Wallace, Caden Saunders, and the kind of core group of guys we know about coming back than maybe some other people, but they do lack the obvious, consistent number one threat that makes you feel great going into a year.
I'm on the record. I think Tyler Warren's the number one threat, first, second, and third probably all together, but different mismatches there. Thank you all for taking this hypothetical walk down the rabbit hole with T. Frank and I. Thomas Frank Carr, in my opinion, is the best analyst when it comes to college football and the best analyst when it comes to Penn State football. Check him out on Blue White Illustrated as part of the On3 network. Thank you so much, and enjoy that Silicon Valley presentation. I think it's going to go swimmingly.
Yeah, hashtag Bitcoin or Ethereum. I don't know. I have to brush up on my words that mean nothing that I can just throw out there. Clearly, I'm not good at that right now because I had to think of them on the spot, and all I could think of was
it's coach speak.
Nonsense.
It's basically coach speak. You're doing great.
Absolutely.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle @StateOfStatePod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.